So my guest on this week's Music Discovery on Soho Radio is the fantastic producer, singer and composer Hannah Peel, back with a brand new project, a studio album called Fir Wave that landed just a couple of weeks back now. Hi Hannah, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you.
How's everything been? I mean, we're kind of like 2 weeks on, aren't we, from release date? So
It's amazing. Do you know, I've found this release the least stressful that I've ever done.
yeah,
Because there's no live shows involved, and like you're not thinking about the tour and you're not thinking about how you're going to rehearse and booking all the rehearsals and things like that. So I've actually like the process of releasing a record has been so lovely and enjoyable. It came out over a week ago and it's been really wonderful to enjoy and react to people online and see how the record's done. And it was a self-released record, so it's been lovely to watch the whole process unfold without the stress of playing live and thinking about touring and moving gigs and all the kind of COVID related stuff that everybody else is trying to manage at the moment. And I've kind of set myself a goal of like, I probably won't play this record ever live. So it does feel quite nice to enjoy the recording release process.
yeah, kind of like the purest approach to releasing an album. Just that's it, and it exists, and you can take what you will from it, sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. It's lovely. It's really lovely. And to see, so many people react to it being spring as well. And I wrote it specifically for spring in terms of I wanted to feel like we were coming out of something by the time it was released. And it definitely, on a sunny day like today feels like that is possible. So.
Yeah, definitely. And critically acclaimed. I saw one of the reviews said you're the queen of headphone dreamscapes, which I liked a lot. So true.
Oh, that's so lovely.
But yeah, it must be nice to just kind of have that reaction to it, and it must feel good.
Yeah, I guess, when you're making something and you just don't know how people are going to react, and it was just a tiny release. It wasn't anything that, okay, yeah, it's got the kind of attachment of Delia Derbyshire and the Radiophonic Workshop and me kind of reworking that original 70s record, but it just felt like something that, I can just put out, and it doesn't really, it might take off and it might not. And so it's lovely that, like I've had time to talk to you and press and radio and enjoy that. I think that's such a nice thing it's a nice change for me because I've been releasing records for like 10 years now. So yeah.
Yeah. And there's such an interesting backstory with the Delia Derbyshire and KPM library, which I want to talk about. But first, I noticed on your Instagram on release day, there was something about a swan and Peter Gabriel. I think I need to know more.
Yeah, so oh my God,
Tell me.
it was such an intense week. Yes, so at some point in the next year, there will be something that will come out with the wonderful Para Orchestra, who are a Bristol-based non-disabled integrated orchestra of professional musicians. I mean, they're just phenomenal, and we had the opportunity to go and record something at Real World. But on the last day, there was unfortunately, where Real World is, it's situated in a mill, and the studio kind of sits out on the lake where swans and ducks and everything are. But where the old wheel is, it kind of goes underneath the mill, so the water would run and pump the water through the building and out the other side. And a swan had got stuck down where the wheel would have been, so it was underneath the building.
Yeah.
I could see him from the office because there's the glass floor in the office that sees the water going through. And they couldn't get him out, and God knows how long he'd been there, he or she. But they had like 18 fire brigade turned up. Like, just they must have been so bored. There was like 3 fire engines, 18 guys. Everybody kind of stood around, and then all of a sudden Peter Gabriel appears with his dog, and he was like, "Oh, are you Hannah? And have you had a nice time?" And I was like, "I've had the best time, and this is the best bit of it ever." So yeah, he was lovely. So I'm really glad to have met him. It was really
That
nice.
is that is incredible. A swan rescue and then Peter Gabriel. I mean, it should have just been like, him walking towards you. Has he got a good dog? Is it a
Yeah,
nice, nice
yeah,
big? Yeah.
nice, gorgeous Labrador, I think.
Oh, of course Peter Gabriel has a Labrador. Of course.
Oh, he's not going to have like a pit bull or something, is
No,
he?
no, just like a classic good dog. That's amazing. And I mean, yeah, what an incredible thing to have met him and for him to be fully aware. So, God, I can imagine a Hannah Peel, Peter Gabriel collaboration at some point in the future would be immense.
That would be so beautiful. I would
Be so
enjoy that a lot.
Yeah, it'd be so good. So let's talk about this record, Fir Wave, which just came out. So you were given access to reinterpret the 1972 KPM 1000 series Electrosonic, which is the music of, as you mentioned earlier, Delia Derbyshire and the Radiophonic Workshop, just pioneering electronic sounds and music. So when was this conceived? Like, what made you actually firstly, delve into that archive? What was the starting point?
Yeah, EMI Production, who look after KPM library releases back through the ages now, approached and said, would I like to make a new version of this record, Electrosonic, and just as a library record. And, I guess as a kind of record releasing artist, I was a bit ignorant to actually what library music actually is and how it how amazing it is actually in terms of like marking time through the ages in terms of genres and how many artists have released library records but you would never know because they've done it under pseudonyms. Like even for this one, Delia Derbyshire isn't named as that, and the others, then they've got kind of other names, maybe because they were working for the BBC at the time, I don't know, but it's a wonderful way for artists to try things out. And so I said, okay, I'll have a go and do something which actually is it's quite a precious record in some senses. There's not much kind of releases of Delia, and I think this is one of them where you really feel the kind of the history of electronic music and the sounds and the atmospheres that she and her colleagues created that would have been used on kind of industrial scientific programs and I have no idea whether they ever got used because the whole record is pretty bonkers. So the starting point was, how do I take something like this that is quite iconic and make it into something else? So it was quite a long process, a lot of revisiting, a lot of changing, and then eventually, I decided that the best way to do it was not to kind of remix it or take samples from it where you can hear the melodies, but to actually just capture the sounds in themselves and make those into instruments so that then I could play them via my MIDI keyboard and the computer, and I could create chords and melodies and whatever I wanted with just the sounds. And then that meant I could kind of forget about the KPM record for a while, just to kind of focus on making something new. So that's how it started. And yeah, came back to it in the beginning of lockdown and revisited it and got it mixed again. And a wonderful producer called TJ Allen, Tim Allen, he's worked with like Bats for Lashes and Laura Groves and all sorts of gorgeous people. He just had a go at kind of co-producing a couple of the tracks that I had kind of couldn't see the wood for the trees on without that being a crazy pun. But, that was kind of like I'd kind of hit a wall with it. And sometimes you need a creative input from somebody else to just lift it and take it somewhere else. So, so it was a lot of fun. And it was done in the time of like where we just kind of a year ago where we just kind of sat down and realized we were not going to be moving for a while. So
yeah, so you had the time to focus and to sort of go through it all. I mean, did it take hours, days? Was it going through all of that stuff initially, going through all of the record and the stems? I guess I imagine there must have been quite a lot there to
it was, and it did take quite a long time. I would say something like that would probably take me a lot quicker usually, and I think because of not the pressure of it but the delicacy of it, I didn't it's hard to kind of assess. And I guess what is beautiful about electronic and library music in particular is that you're not really writing for an audience. Like you're not having to fulfill your buying and paying audience and your fans. It's to do with really just exploring sounds and enjoying them and taking a moment to reflect on them. And I think actually that really comes out in the record. A lot of people have commented on the sound worlds and the dreamscapes in the headphones. So I think that's a real positive, actually.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it is so atmospheric, you know. You've got the real stompers, like Emergence in Nature, and then you've got the more ethereal soundscapey work in there as well, and it sort of takes you on this wonderful journey. And there's also kind of broader themes, aren't there, of like old meets new and the earth and ecological cycles and things. So can you tell me a little bit about why you were drawn to those?
Yeah, so yeah, there's, I guess in the first record, there was a real essence of patterns in nature and things like a track called Quest and, like wizards. And it was all kind of like very futuristic, scientific for the time. And it felt like the sounds really echoed that. And when I started looking into even just like the track names and the feel of the tracks that were kind of coming out, there was like, these like bubbling sounds in the original that, when I was doing a radio show for Radio 3 and we were exploring like the insides of trees and what they sound like, and people were sending us recordings across the world. And it was really amazing, the kind of the beauty and the synchronicity between those sounds on the original 70s record and the sounds within a tree, and the sounds of it sucking water up from the ground and the movement within the tree. It's amazing. And so there was a real element of like, I guess, we're in lockdown and we were very much at the time in spring kind of looking at nature and the birds and having time to sit and pause, and there was less air traffic and less road traffic. And so it felt like it needed to echo now, and the eco of the earth and now, and patterns and the delicacy of like things like carbon cycles. And then when I started exploring, like the names of things in nature, like Fir Wave came up, and I was just like, wow, what is a Fir Wave? I've never heard of it before. And then when you see that it's actually like, it looks like sound waves on a mountainside created by fir trees, and the wind disturbance that has created it I was like, oh my God, like, that would take years and years to make. But in sound, it's so quick and it's there and it's gone. And I just thought there was a real connection between nature and this record. I mean, electronic music is part of the earth and the environment which we live in as well. So.
Yeah. That was Emergence in Nature. I've got Hannah Peel on the show, and that's from her brand new album, Fir Wave. Honestly, I would love to hear that in Printworks or something with visuals all over the walls, floating points style.
Oh, I love floating points.
That would, or like in a big club space or something. And I know you said you might not do a live thing with this record, but at some point when you do play live, the tracks like that would work really, really well, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. Yeah, do you know what? I did I toured with a record called Awake But Always Dreaming in 2016, which kind of went into 2018 by the time I'd kind of finished gigging with it. And as one of those gigs that I did a David Holmes night in Belfast. He used to put on these amazing club nights called God's Own Waiting Room. And it was just fab. And he'd always have a guest or something there. And it, be like in a working men's club down by the docks or something. And I prepped a set that was very, very clubby, and it was very different for me, but it was one of the best gigs I've done. Like, I loved it. Like, and it actually was like, oh my God, if I'm going to do another record, I really, really want to have more tracks on it like this, like the energy from the crowd and everybody, dancing. And normally, because a lot of my music would be done in maybe theaters or concert halls where you're sat down and you don't get that energy and reaction. So yeah, I think, we'll see what comes out even further down the line, but it was a good feeling. I love it.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about the making of that track. Was there anything that, sort of that you discovered, or just a story of kind of, the creation of it?
Yeah, so it started off and it was very different, very different. And like, I made the beats. I've got a little drum machine, a little kind of 60s drum machine called Mini Pops, which was made by KO, who were before Korg. And it's it was going through a couple of pedals. It was very kind of analogy, but not really that pumping. And that was one of the ones I sent to Tim Allen, and said, can you just take this and see what comes out? And we have a kind of mutual love for a lot of kind of Steve Reich kind of music and 18 musicians in particular. And so he just came back with this instantly with this kind of, he'd taken the beats and took them to a different level in terms of like adding sub and kick and things that really kept it driven, and then came back with some brass and the woodwind and the pumping kind of melody, and then it just all of a sudden, like a little bit tweaking back and forth, and the whole track just kind of took off. But yeah, it's funny how it, we talked about patterns earlier, and Steve Reich and Philip Glass and things like that have really influenced that music in a way, in a roundabout way as well.
And you're always kind of pushing what you do with every project you do. It always feels what feels from a listening perspective, and I suppose from a journalist perspective, feels very ambitious. Casio Journey to Cassiopeia was like for synthesizers and a 30-piece colliery brass band, casual, and then you do lots of soundtrack work as well, and Awake But Always Dreaming, that was related to sort of more of a concept around your grandmother's dementia. So in what ways did this project push you? It seems like it was very, like you say, it was sort of quite organic and not so stressful perhaps, but yeah, what ways did it push you to out of your comfort zone, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess like God, it was less stressful because you're not dealing with 30 brass players and trying to take them on tour and get them recorded. Yeah, I think it was quite nice to actually, for the first time, focus in a bit more inwardly and to do something that wasn't just, about something really personal. The Alzheimer's dementia record was so personal, and it was really a hard journey for me to get to that record and to make that record, and then to do this one was so much easier. I mean, it didn't kind of push me, but I mean, I guess working in that way where you're working with historic material has done. I mean, I've never done that before, and and creating something that is quite, I hope, is quite futuristic as well, in terms of like pushing the boundaries of what an electronic record can be. Like, it doesn't need to be synthetic sounds, it can be as organic as it possibly can, and so yeah, that's a new avenue. I guess I've always put that into things, like underneath things, like maybe underneath Mary Casio there are elements to that quite a lot, but not as the forefront, as a sole electronic record, and so it was lovely to do that for once. And yeah, the soundtracks are always wonderful and exciting, but you are collaborating so extensively with such a massive team of producers and execs and the director and editors, and it's not necessarily your music, it's a collaborative joint output. So yeah, this is nice that it's just mine. It's nice.
Yeah. I hadn't realized that you'd done the Game of Thrones Last Watch doc until recently. And then I watched all of Game of Thrones when it came out, and then I actually binged the first few series because the last series was coming out and I hadn't ever seen it. And I remember just watching it over the space of about 3 months, and
oh my God,
and it was a lot. So I went in and then watched the last series as it was coming out week by week. But yeah, just the other day I noticed that you'd done The Last Watch, and then I got really excited and watched it because I hadn't seen it, and then now I'm considering revisiting the whole thing again. But how amazing to have worked on, I mean, that you kind of, you did the sound. It's the documentary basically where they film over the course of the year, the last series being shot, which is just mind blowing how they did it. But yeah, how did that come about? What was it like working on Game of Thrones? It's such a huge deal for so many people.
It was so amazing. It was so much fun, and I got in Belfast. I got to go visit the set, which is a kind of like a copy of Dubrovnik. And it was when I remember going, because it was just a bright blue sky, sunny day, and walking around the streets, and I honestly felt like you were in Dubrovnik. It was amazing.
Yeah.
You're in Belfast. And saw a couple of the scenes being shot. But Jeannie Finlay, the director of that, is just an amazing documentary maker. I mean, her films that she's made before, she's just fabulous. Everything she touches is really finds the heart of a story. And, you know, she wasn't really interested in going and making a documentary about the actors because it's not necessarily about them. It's about the people that have put 10 years of their lives into this TV show and made it what it is. And some of them started off, they were, you know, not known, and then they've gone on to be special effects specialists that have won like 5 or 6 Emmys and made a career. And a lot of people have come from Northern Ireland, have grown up with that. I think that's a really fabulous thing that a TV show can give that back to not only a community of artists and creators, but a whole country in a way. So yeah, the legacy will definitely live on. I guess with COVID, it's kind of stopped, but you could do tours and things. But anyway, it was really fab to work on. And Jeannie herself shot it over so long a period that she had like 900 hours of footage to edit with her team. And, you know, getting that down into 2 hours was a massive task. I think the editing in itself took a year. And so I was part of that. I did the same as you. I hadn't actually watched it, so I binge watched it over a whole summer and and completely, you know, like watched 2 or 3 hours a day of it to just get through it. And yeah, completely fell in love with it in a way that it does that to you, doesn't it? It kills off characters. You then end up Googling the family lineage because you can't quite figure out who is who and where they come from. But you know, it's an addiction watching it. So yeah, to see that on set was just really fabulous. But I guess composing for it was also quite not complicated, but also I had to be wary of the original composer and not step on the toes of that music in a way. Like, I mean, the closest I come to it is doing the music box version of the theme tune,
yeah,
which is what Jeannie wanted and what she knew me for, which is the music box. And we've worked together on another amazing film that she did called The Great Hip Hop Hoax. I don't know if you remember that, where
no, I've not seen it.
I can't remember the guys that she follows, but it's 2 Scottish rappers. And then they pretended, there's a real story, they pretended to be American in order to get gigs. And they got like a massive record deal with Sony. They had like Kylie's manager. And then the whole time they're keeping up this pretense that they're American and from this part of America, and they're now in the UK. And then it got to the point where they had to go on tour and give their passports in. And then it all kind of came out that they were Scottish from a little town, and they kept this whole thing up. So she did a documentary about them, and she used a track of I was in a band called the Magnetic North. Well, we still have the band, we just haven't got together for a while, but she used a track of that to finish the actual show. So we met through that. So it was lovely that she came and said, do you want to do the music for this? So.
Yeah, I just got so excited watching it, because it's just like you say, like all those stories of the extras and the prosthetics department, you know, and actually, yeah, just how much it required of people, you know. They were away from family and away for months, and all those grueling night shoots for that last series. Wow.
Yeah. And she brings that out. I think that's what the beauty of her storytelling is that she brings that out in people, and she spots the untold stories. I think that's a real skill, and you know, not many people have that in order to bring that out in a documentary. But yeah, it was really sad, like the little girl that doesn't get to see her mum and dad because they're in charge of all the prosthetics, and they're away for months on end working through the night. And it was really heartbreaking when they all meet up. And I love it. I love there's so many characters in that, and you know, the extra, and then the Mr. Snowman and Charge of Snow, and it's just all these things you don't think about when you're watching it at all, do you?
Not at all. So let's play another track from Fir Wave. Let's play the next single. It's called Evocative. Tell me a bit about this one.
Yes. So it's a bit of a pun one because it's eco-vocative.
I've written evocative, but yeah, that's because I've just glanced at it. Eco-vocative. Clever. Yeah. See what you did there.
Everybody, my manager was like, why have you called it this? Because it's so hard to write because it always comes up wrong as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just when I was doing the search of like different patterns in nature, this company came up. I don't think they're actually called eco-vocative. I think they're called something else. but they came up and they make packaging out of mushrooms. And I just thought it was really wonderful. And so I think that inspired the name of eco-vocative. I think it's a really fun way of looking at how we can change the environment. Yeah.
So, I mean, how have things been for you? Obviously, this last year, I mean, we didn't really touch on it actually at the beginning, but this last year has just been completely bonkers for everybody and certainly for musicians. You know, it's
Mhm.
been completely different. How have you navigated it? And, you know, has everything been okay? You know, have you felt fulfilled and sort of excited by what you're doing, even though everything's been, you know, in just such a different way?
Um, yeah, it's been crazy. Am I allowed to say I've had a great time? Like,
Yeah, of course.
because I know it has been pretty horrid for a lot of people and a struggle, and sometimes you do feel bad about saying I've really enjoyed like that. I've not had to move around and tour, and the year before lockdown, I did like 90, something like 95 gigs in a whole year. And when you're doing that much traveling, you don't get to write much music. Like you're constantly just kind of gigging and going places and then recovering from that. And so, yeah, I've had a really productive year in terms of like writing a lot of music, doing a lot of radio shows for Night Tracks on Radio 3, listening to tons of music and enjoying that whole process of like actually having the time to do that. Like I mean, doing the Night Tracks thing was brilliant because yes, like a lot of people, I had a lot of things that went, like work that was scheduled was gone, and I guess the one thing that I had in the beginning was like I was doing my regular Night Tracks, and it was just amazing to be able to play people's music because a lot of people were sending music in that they recorded at home, and a lot of classical musicians that weren't working were recording their own tracks and sending beautiful stuff. And so the amount of kind of like acquaintances I've made and record labels that I know that are putting out stuff that are really interesting, I think is it's just so nice to be able to do that and play other people's music for a change, and rather than thinking of my own, because actually it takes you out of your own headspace and allows you to appreciate things. And sometimes we have this thing of like there's so much music out there. How do you find something you like, and how do you have the time to listen to it? Like, before doing Night Tracks, I would have just sat kind of at home going, I have no idea. There's too much music. How do I cope with this? And I guess having, yeah, the space of lockdown really changed that perspective for me and has inspired me to write different types of music as well. So I'm really appreciative of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and actually almost having the time to respond to people. I've connected with loads of people that maybe in a normal busy year I might not have had the time to really listen to their music or reply or give them the feedback or advice or help them or put them in touch with someone, you know.
Yeah.
And that's been I think quite a special thing actually. Just
Yeah.
having that time to do it a bit more, even though, you know, just because it's sort of off the hamster wheel of everything else. Um,
Yeah. And I guess like, doing Zoom helps. In some ways, I feel busier because you have more time to put a meeting in because like, if you're in London and then you have a meeting at 12, you sometimes spend an hour getting there, an hour two for the meeting, then an hour getting back. That's like half your day gone. Especially for me, like writing music, that's half a day gone. Like I can't get back into the flow of writing something after that. So yeah, it feels really good that you can. There is, and yeah, I moved out of London, so I live by the sea now, and it just feels quite nice to be in a place where you can appreciate nature more.
yeah,
And I think that's really fed into the music I've been writing, like completely, really. So
yeah. So
mm,
lots of other projects then. So what have you written? You know, another record. Like what have you been working on?
yeah. So I guess like I mean, the beginning of lockdown, I was finishing a TV show that came out in August last year called The Deceived, and that was on Channel 5. So the very beginning of that was a period of I'd had 4 to 5 months of really intense my own lockdown in a way. So I'd actually planned a holiday in April last year, and obviously didn't get that break, but there was a lot of me trying to kind of finish that in lockdown and getting remote musicians and mixing remotely and delivering the TV show. And then I had time to work on this piece for the Parrot Orchestra, and really think about that and who they are as musicians and what kind of music I would like to write for them to perform. And the different disabilities that are within that orchestra and how to write for specifically for them as performers, because they're so individual and amazing that you can't just give the I didn't feel like I wanted to deliver a piece that could be played by any orchestra. It's specific to them. So I spent quite a lot of my summer last year writing that, and recording that is a process we're going through at the moment, and then hopefully we'll do something at the end of this year or in 22 together, and we'll see how that all pans out. And then, yeah, a couple of like little projects, TV shows, and working with the Manchester Collective. I don't know if you know them.
No.
They are a wonderful kind of contemporary classical uh, group ensemble in Manchester, and they really push the boundaries of getting working with composers and developing pieces and doing kind of R&D with the composers so that they develop pieces that work for them as well. So I had sort of fun time writing for them, and that's the first time I've ever written for an ensemble and then not been part of it in terms of I'll be part of the performance. So that in itself is really scary, and I don't know if I'll do that again. At least when you're part of it, you can be part of the rehearsal process and you can change things. And whereas I think there's an element of like sitting back and watching something where you have no kind of input into it feels too raw. But they'll premiere that hopefully this year at King's Place, I think in June. So
Awesome.
that's something to look forward to.
Haven't you been busy?
I'm no, sorry. I've just like rattled off a load of
No,
things.
it's amazing. It's so good. It sounds like you've been so productive. It's fantastic. It's yeah, going forwards into the next kind of phase of yeah, the next year. It seems like there's just going to be so much. And we've just been given this wonderful album, and I know I can speak for myself, but I'm sure I can speak for a lot of people. Like, it's a real treat, this record.
Oh, thank you.
It really is. And I wanted to play another track from it just to sort of finish off, but I couldn't decide between Fir Wave, which is the title track, and Reaction Diffusion, which is the last track, which is so good. So I thought I'd let you pick. Which one should we play?
Oh, I think play Fir Wave because
Yes.
it has a certain essence to it that it sums up a lot of my headspace, and a lot of people have commented how meditative it is and how they've enjoyed listening to it and kind of zoning out.
Hannah Peel, thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to chat to you.
Thank you for having me.